The transaction was finalized not with a kiss, but with a signature. The price was not measured in currency, but in flesh and blood. Olga Merkusheva, a 25-year-old woman from St. Petersburg with a bright future seemingly ahead of her, paid for her signature on an official form with her heart, her liver, both kidneys, her corneas, and ultimately, her very existence. Her marriage, a union that lasted less than a single day with a man who presented himself as an Indian prince, did not culminate in a romantic honeymoon under the Arabian stars. Instead, it reached its horrifying conclusion on the cold, stainless steel surface of an operating table in a private clinic in Abu Dhabi, a facility known more for its discretion than its Hippocratic integrity. Hello and a very dark welcome to The Killer Next Door. I'm your host, and in this space, we pull back the curtain on the most chilling true crime stories. The ones that prove the most monstrous secrets are often hiding in plain sight, right next door. Before we dive into today's devastating case, I want to make this a conversation with all of you watching. The truth is, these stories hit differently depending on where in the world you're listening from. So, let me know who's out there. Leave a comment right now and tell me two things: your name, and the city or country you're watching from. Not only does it help me feel connected to this incredible community, but I'll be giving a shout out to some of you in our next video. Let's see how far and wide the Killer Next Door family reaches. Now, if you think the concept of a predator using a fairy tale romance as a trap sounds like something from a movie, wait until you hear the story of Olga Merkusheva. You might have even seen this story pop up in the true crime corners of the internet, but today, we're going to break it down in a way you haven't heard before, exposing the chilling, step-by-step process that turns human life into a transaction. There, under the blinding glare of surgical lights, her body was not treated with the reverence due a human being, but was methodically and efficiently dismantled, its components catalogued and prepared for sale on the global black market for human organs. This case, a stark testament to the dark underbelly of globalized crime and systemic impunity, never received the widespread coverage in the world press that its horror warranted. It remained instead a series of cryptic, classified entries in the encrypted databases of a handful of underfunded human rights organizations, and the subject of a tense, yet ultimately fruitless, quiet investigation conducted between the diplomatic corps of several nations, where realpolitik and economic interests consistently overshadowed the pursuit of justice for a single, extinguished life. The genesis of this modern-day tragedy, like so many in the 21st century, was woven in the digital threads of social media. In April of 2023, Olga Merkusheva, a vibrant and curious resident of St. Petersburg, embarked on a long-dreamed-of tourist trip through the glittering city-states of the Persian Gulf. Her Instagram profile, a carefully curated gallery of her life, became a live stream of her adventures, filled with sun-drenched images of soaring skyscrapers piercing the haze, vast, ochre-hued desert landscapes, and plates of exotic, beautifully presented food. It was the profile of a young woman embracing the world, her captions filled with excitement and wonder. However, this narrative of innocent exploration was abruptly and irrevocably shattered by a single post. The image showed her, radiant and smiling, standing beside a tall, strikingly handsome man with a meticulously groomed beard, his arm draped possessively around her shoulders. He was dressed in an impeccably tailored suit that whispered of immense, unspoken wealth. The caption beneath this photograph was deceptively simple, yet it would become the tragic epitaph of her old life. I fell in love with the man of my dreams. He's like something out of a movie, an Indian prince. This digital declaration, which garnered a few hundred congratulatory likes from her friends and followers, was the starting pistol for a journey that would lead not to familial bliss and a fairy tale ending, but to a sterile, windowless operating room where the very concept of humanity was stripped away in the name of profit. The man in the photograph, the architect of this deception, was 31-year-old Sahil Raja Singh Bahadur. To Olga, and to any outsider unfamiliar with the complex and often misunderstood intricacies of India's post-colonial aristocracy, his story was compelling. He introduced himself as the direct heir to an ancient and noble family, a prince of the historic city of Jaipur. The reality, however, was far more mundane and infinitely more sinister. The formal institution of princely states in India was abolished by the government decades ago, and while the descendants of the Maharajas often continued to use their hereditary titles in social contexts, they hold no official political power or legal sovereignty. For Sahil, the son of a former state-level minister from Maharashtra, the title was nothing more than a carefully polished component of a manufactured persona, a piece of psychological bait that had proven devastatingly effective on ambitious young women from foreign countries, particularly those from nations where such titles still carried a romantic, anachronistic weight. His performance was flawless, supported by a foundation of genuine, though illicitly used, wealth. He possessed all the requisite attributes of inherited success: impeccable public school English that flowed without accent, a collection of Swiss-made watches worth more than the average annual salary in Olga's hometown, and a seemingly endless repertoire of captivating stories about private parties on mega-yachts in Monaco and casual acquaintances with Hollywood celebrities and tech billionaires. Critically, these fabrications were bolstered by his family's very real financial status, a fortune derived from political connections and business ventures that provided the liquid capital necessary to fund his predatory lifestyle. This fusion of elaborate fiction and tangible wealth made his lies almost indistinguishable from truth, creating a potent illusion that few could see through. He invited Olga to join him in Abu Dhabi, the glittering capital of the United Arab Emirates, under a pretext she found impossible to refuse: an immediate, whirlwind wedding and the beginning of their life together as a power couple, judging by the euphoric messages she sent to a single close friend back in St. Petersburg. Olga was utterly convinced of the sincerity of his intentions. She described the unfolding events in the language of a modern-day fairy tale. She detailed the appearance of a heavy gold ring, set with a diamond of impressive size and clarity, presented to her on the very first evening of her arrival as a token of his commitment. She marveled at the constant presence of a personal driver, poised at the wheel of a silent, black Rolls-Royce, ready to whisk her away at a moment's notice. Her temporary home was a suite at the legendary Emirates Palace Hotel, architectural marvel of gold leaf and marble whose construction cost was rumored to have exceeded $3 billion. A place known for catering to the whims of royalty and oligarchs. Her messages to her friend were saturated with a sense of delirious disbelief at her own staggering good fortune. She described the vast, marbled hallways, the private beach of imported white sand that stretched for over a kilometer, and the discreet, ever-attentive personal butler assigned exclusively to her suite. This entire orchestrated spectacle was designed to create an impenetrable illusion of absolute security and to provide a irrefutable, tangible confirmation of her chosen one's exalted status in the world. The day after her arrival, on April 6th, the tone of her digital communications shifted perceptibly. In the early morning, she sent her confidant a short, hurried voice message. This fleeting audio clip would later become the most critical piece of evidence in the patchwork, unofficial investigation into her subsequent disappearance. Olga's voice, usually bright and clear, now sounded muffled, layered with a complex mixture of giddy excitement and a poorly concealed, nascent anxiety. She whispered, "Today we will be officially married according to Muslim traditions. I'm a little scared, but he said it's temporary, just a formality to legalize our relationship for the hotel and for the authorities here." The explanation that Sahil had provided to Olga was, from any rational legal standpoint, patently absurd. Yet, In the intoxicating atmosphere of all-consuming luxury and her rapidly deepening trust in a man who appeared to command the very world around him, it apparently sounded plausible enough to suppress her doubts. That brief, anxious message was the last digital trace of Olga Merkusheva as a living, breathing individual. After it was sent, her phone ceased all activity, falling into an uncharacteristic and permanent silence. Her Instagram account, once a vibrant chronicle of her life, went dark. To the outside world, it was as if Olga had simply vanished, swallowed whole by the immense, polished opulence of the wealthiest city on the planet. This digital silence persisted for 11 agonizing days. For her family and small circle of friends back in Russia, it was concerning, but not yet panic-inducing. They rationalized the quiet, assuming she was simply absorbed in the throes of a new, passionate romance, or perhaps preoccupied with the logistics of an impromptu wedding in a foreign land. In our hyper-connected world, her absence from the virtual sphere was noticeable, but the most sinister explanations had not yet begun to crystallize. Unbeknownst to them, the real, horrifying narrative was unfolding not in the glamorous hotels or restaurants of Abu Dhabi, but in the sterile, soundproofed corridors of the private Al-Noor Specialty Hospital. This elite medical facility, renowned for serving the region's royal families and its population of ultra-wealthy expatriates, placed an almost fanatical emphasis on patient confidentiality, a principle that often superseded more mundane concerns like procedural transparency or external oversight. It was within this protected environment, shielded from prying eyes by layers of money and privilege, that the system catastrophically failed, and a profound evil was allowed to proceed with clinical efficiency. The first crack in this formidable wall of silence appeared thanks to the conscience and courage of a single individual, a junior resident doctor named Yahya Abbas. Deeply troubled by what he had witnessed, he initiated a clandestine, internal inquiry, an action he fully intended to keep contained within the hospital's administrative structure. However, the information he uncovered was so alarming that he felt compelled to break the chain of command. Through an anonymous, encrypted communication channel he had previously established with a small, Geneva-based human rights organization specializing in medical ethics violations, Dr. Abbas transmitted a report that detailed facts violating every conceivable medical and legal norm. His message described how the body of a young woman, clearly of European descent, had been admitted to the hospital's intensive care unit under the most suspicious circumstances. She arrived without any of the standard accompanying documentation that would verify her identity or explain her condition. He reported that, pursuant to a verbal order issued directly from the clinic's upper management, she was to be immediately registered as an organ donor, her status attributed to a fatal traffic accident. It was the specific, anomalous details of this accident that ignited Dr. Abbas's professional suspicion and personal dread. He meticulously noted two critical, glaring inconsistencies that pointed toward a much darker truth. First, the patient had not been delivered by a registered ambulance crew or by the police, which is the mandatory standard procedure for any genuine emergency, be it a traffic collision, a fall, or any other traumatic incident requiring urgent hospitalization. Instead, her body was transported in a private, unmarked vehicle, which had entered the secure hospital grounds through a service entrance normally reserved for staff and supply deliveries, a route specifically chosen to avoid the main reception areas and their associated digital surveillance. Second, and perhaps more damningly, there was no corresponding record in the hospital's central logbook of a police report being filed, nor was there any documentation of an initial medical assessment having been conducted at the alleged scene of the accident. The body, and the dire medical situation it represented, had simply materialized within the clinic's system, as if it had spontaneously generated, bypassing all the standard protocols designed to prevent exactly this kind of opaque occurrence. according to the internal documents that Dr. Abbas, at great personal risk, managed to secretly photograph, the organ retrieval process was carried out with a speed and efficiency that spoke not of emergency medicine, but of a well-rehearsed commercial extraction. The woman's heart, both kidneys, liver, and both corneas were surgically removed within a mere 4-hour window following the official declaration of brain death. Such rapid mobilization testified to an extraordinary level of pre-coordination and readiness within the surgical team. This was not the unpredictable, ad hoc response to a sudden tragedy. It was the execution of a pre-planned, time-sensitive operation. In the official paperwork, the donor was identified as a certain Fatima bint Khalid, a 29-year-old citizen of Syria. This choice of identity was a masterstroke of cynical calculation. The ongoing civil war in Syria had created a massive diaspora of refugees scattered across the Middle East, many of whom struggled with lost, forged, or incomplete documentation. Their registration with foreign authorities was often patchwork at best, and diplomatic protection from their shattered homeland was virtually non-existent. Such a woman could disappear, and it was unlikely that any robust, official entity would ever come looking for her. To the system, she was the perfect ghost, a person without a past, without a voice, and without an advocate. A subsequent, formal fingerprint check, conducted as a matter of procedure, yielded no matches in any of the interconnected databases of the Gulf Cooperation Council countries or in Interpol's records, a result that only served to reinforce her status as a legal nonentity. It was the anonymous report from Dr. Abbas, a lone voice of integrity in a chorus of complicity, that finally set a chain of independent events into motion. The human rights activists in Geneva, upon receiving and decrypting his information, immediately launched their own parallel investigation. They began cross-referencing the data on the arrival of Fatima at the clinic with their own, painstakingly compiled database of female tourists who had recently gone missing across the Middle East. It was during this digital dragnet that their attention was drawn to the case of Olga Merkusheva, whose Instagram profile had fallen silent during the precise time frame in question. Using publicly available photographs from her social media accounts, the activists were able to convey two distinct, key physical identifiers to their trusted contacts within Abu Dhabi: a small but clearly visible surgical scar on the right side of her abdomen, the remnant of an appendectomy performed during her teenage years, and a distinctive, dark mole position just above her right collarbone, which was visible in several of her older beach photographs. A few days later, the confirmation arrived, a message that was both a breakthrough and a profound affirmation of their worst fears. A source inside the clinic, whose identity remains protected and who was risking not only their career but their very liberty, managed to gain illicit access to the body in the hours before it was scheduled for cremation. This individual confirmed, with grim certainty, that the two distinguishing features, the appendectomy scar and the supraclavicular mole, matched the photographs of Olga Merkusheva exactly. The unknown Syrian woman, Fatima bint Khalid, and the missing Russian tourist, Olga Merkusheva, were one and the same person. The body, which was supposed to be erased from existence without a trace, had been given back its name. Consequently, Olga's disappearance was instantly transformed from a worrying mystery into a clear-cut case of deliberate, premeditated murder, meticulously disguised under the legitimizing cloak of a voluntary medical donation. The positive identification of Olga Merkusheva's body acted as the master key, unlocking a terrifying vista into the workings of a sophisticated, well-oiled, and utterly ruthless international mechanism operating in the deep shadows cast by the glittering facades of several Middle Eastern and South Asian megacities. The subsequent investigation, painstakingly pieced together by human rights activists and a handful of sympathetic insiders, revealed that Saho Raja Singh Bahadur was not merely a lone, opportunistic fraudster, but a key, operational node in a transnational network specializing in illegal contract organ harvesting. This network functioned as a shadowy consortium, operating through a discrete web of premium private clinics with facilities in Delhi, Abu Dhabi, and Muscat. Their target demographic was not the stereotypically desperate poor, who might sell a kidney for a few $1,000s, but a more valuable and vulnerable cohort, young, healthy, and often idealistic women from specific countries whose citizens did not always benefit from aggressive or effective diplomatic protection, particularly nations in Eastern Europe, Southeast Asia, and parts of the Indian subcontinent itself. The scheme's chilling brilliance lay in its cynical exploitation of marriage as a legal and cultural loophole. The victims were not kidnapped from the streets or physically coerced into donation. Such crude methods carried too high a risk of exposure. Instead, they were skillfully seduced into a carefully staged theatrical production, the final act of which was the procurement of a legally recognized, if fraudulently obtained, marriage certificate. Men like Sahil played the roles of besotted, wealthy, and influential suitors, appearing ready to move heaven and earth for their chosen companions. They enveloped the victim in a cocoon of extravagant luxury, bestowed upon them expensive gifts as tokens of affection, and orchestrated a whirlwind marriage proposal designed to short-circuit rational judgment with a flood of romantic emotion. The operational pivot of the entire scheme was the rapid solemnization of the marriage, often within a mere 24 to 48 hours of the woman's arrival in the country. These unions were deliberately not registered with official state authorities, where scrutiny might be more rigorous. Instead, they were formalized through compliant religious centers, where Sharia judges, such as the now implicated Sheikh Abdul Majid al-Nimi, the man who officially registered Olga's union with Sahil, would perform the ceremony based on a minimal set of provided documents, and frequently in the conspicuous absence of any independent witnesses from the bride's side. Once her signature was affixed to the marriage contract, the woman's legal status underwent a profound and dangerous transformation. She was no longer merely a foreign tourist with the full rights and protections that status implies. She had become the wife of a local resident, or a powerful foreign national. This new status, according to the twisted, self-serving logic of the network's organizers, granted the husband the legal authority to make critical medical decisions on her behalf in the event of her sudden incapacitation. Signatures on official forms consenting to organ donation after death were almost certainly forged outright or obtained through deception, slipped unnoticed into a larger stack of paperwork presented as necessary for finalizing the marriage or applying for a spousal residence permit. In Olga's specific case, this grim script was followed with surgical precision. Shortly after she sent her final, anxious voice message, it is believed she was persuaded to ingest a powerful sedative or anesthetic, likely under the pretext of calming her nerves before her wedding night or as a simple remedy for travel fatigue. The subsequent events have been reconstructed based on the findings of a clandestine forensic examination conducted by the human rights group's contacts before the scheduled cremation. The official cause of death was listed as a severe traumatic brain injury, resulting from a single, powerful blow to the back of her head with a heavy, blunt object. This impact was calculated not to kill instantly, but to cause massive, irreversible bleeding within the brain, leading to a state that is medically and legally defined as brain death. For the organ harvesters, this specific outcome was the ideal scenario. The victim's heart could be kept beating artificially, maintaining robust blood flow to the vital organs and keeping them perfectly viable for transplantation, while from a cold, legalistic standpoint, the person was already deceased. Her body was then transported to the Al-Noor clinic under the fabricated guise of an accident victim and under the stolen identity of a Syrian refugee. In a move that demonstrated the network's disconcerting reach, subsequent inquiries by Russian diplomats revealed that the UAE police had no official record of a Russian citizen named Merkusheva entering the country on the relevant dates. This indicated that her immigration data had likely been purged from the official database, an operation requiring a significant level of insider access and influence. The final, erasing stage of the scheme was the disposal of the physical evidence. Cremation, a practice uncommon in the Islamic world where burial is the norm, was deliberately chosen as the most forensically secure method of destroying all remaining biological evidence. The ashes that resulted from this process held no value for any potential future investigation. And the official death certificate, issued in the name of the fictitious Fatima bint Khalid, allowed the case to be administratively closed without a single, obvious loose end. The aftermath of this scheme's exposure was, in many ways, as morally devastating as the crime itself. Despite the confirmed identity of the victim and the courageous testimony of a whistleblower, the interconnected systems of power, wealth, and jurisdiction that the perpetrators operated within proved to be virtually impenetrable. None of the central architects of this tragedy ever faced meaningful criminal charges, and what passed for justice was reduced to a series of formal, diplomatic letters and financial penalties that were grotesquely disproportionate to the value of a stolen human life. The primary suspect, Sahu Raja Singh Bahadur, the man who personally engineered Olga's deadly seduction, returned to his life in Mumbai without any hindrance. The United Arab Emirates authorities never formally charged him with a crime, nor did they submit an official request for his extradition to face justice. Without such a request, the Indian law enforcement apparatus had no legal basis upon which to act. Journalistic inquiries directed at his family's political office were met with a wall of silence. According to subsequent reports, Sahil himself has continued to live his life of luxury, appearing at high society galas and managing portions of the family's business empire. To the world at large, he remains exactly what he presented himself to be, a wealthy, connected scion, not a central figure in a murderous conspiracy. The fate of the one man who demonstrated unwavering moral courage in this sordid affair was tragically predictable. Dr. Yahya Abbas, the resident who leaked the damning information to human rights activists, was summarily dismissed from his position at the Al-Noor Clinic on the official grounds of a gross violation of corporate ethics and patient confidentiality. Just 3 days after his very public termination, he vanished completely. Colleagues who spoke anonymously suggested he was making preparations to flee the country. Fearing for his personal safety, he has not been seen or heard from since. His disappearance sent a chillingly clear, albeit unspoken, message to any other individual within the system who might contemplate following his example. The machine is not only capable of concealing its crimes, but is also willing and able to efficiently neutralize those who attempt to expose its workings to the light. The Al-Noor Specialty Hospital itself emerged from the scandal with only superficial and temporary wounds. Following a tightly controlled internal investigation initiated by the UAE Ministry of Health, the institution was levied a substantial administrative fine, a sum easily absorbed as a cost of doing business, and its license to perform organ transplants was suspended for a period of 6 months. Notably, not a single member of the hospital's senior management, nor any of the surgeons who participated in the organ retrieval procedure, faced criminal prosecution. The official conclusion of the government inquiry spoke only of serious systemic failures in documentation and patient identification protocols, carefully avoiding any language that would suggest intentional, malicious intent. For the clinic, the entire episode amounted to a temporary operational inconvenience, a minor price paid for participating in a shadow economy of immense profitability. Even the Sharia judge, Sheikh Abdul Majid al-Naimi, whose signature provided the legal veneer to Olga's fatal marriage, escaped any form of censure. In his sole, brief comment to an inquiring journalist, he stated that he had acted in strict accordance with the provisions of the law, and that the documents presented to him by the couple raised no obvious doubts as to their authenticity, and contained no overt signs of forgery or duress. Following this statement, he refused all further communication, invoking the principle of confidentiality that governs such personal legal matters. The official response from the Russian government, ostensibly acting on behalf of its citizen, also culminated in a diplomatic dead end. The Russian diplomatic mission in the UAE filed a formal request for the repatriation of Olga Merkusheva's body to her family in St. Petersburg, so that an independent autopsy could be performed and she could be laid to rest among her loved ones. The response from the Emirati authorities was a model of bureaucratic finality. It stated unequivocally that the body of the foreign citizen registered as Fatima bint Khalid had already been buried in accordance with local Islamic traditions, as no next of kin had come forward to claim it within the legally mandated time frame. Therefore, the note concluded, further exhumation and identification were impossible. This official statement contained at least two deliberate falsehoods. First, the body had been cremated, not buried, and second, her identity had been definitively and reliably established by multiple parties. Thus, Olga Merkusheva was effectively erased twice, first physically, through dismemberment and combustion, and then bureaucratically, through the cold formalism of official correspondence. Her Instagram profile was deleted by unknown parties. Her bank accounts, to which Sahil, as her legal spouse, would have had immediate access, were swiftly emptied and closed. The only tangible, paper evidence of her final day on Earth was a photocopy of her marriage certificate, dated April 6, 2023. On this single sheet of paper, stamped with an official seal, the names of the husband and wife were inscribed in elegant Arabic calligraphy. In the space reserved for the bride, the name read, Fatima al-Rashid, and next to it, in a parenthetical note added in English, presumably for internal administrative reference, was a chilling annotation. Maiden name Merkusheva. This single line served as her true, stark epitaph, a legal document that coldly recorded the brutal transformation of a living, hoping, feeling human being into a nameless source of raw biological material for a roster of anonymous, paying recipients. She believed in the fairy tale because its production values were impeccable, its acting superb, and its setting utterly convincing. A royal title, limitless luxury, a spontaneous marriage proposal. It was a script designed to appeal to the most universal of human yearnings. But behind this glittering facade lay not a heart filled with love, but a mind governed by cold, commercial calculation. In a globalized world where healthy human organs can command prices in the hundreds of thousands of dollars on the black market, the most intimate and vulnerable of human feelings, trust, hope, and the desire for love, themselves become commodified. They are leveraged, weaponized, and used as the most effective bait imaginable. The story of Olga Merkusheva is not, at its core, a story of unrequited love or a relationship gone wrong. It is a terrifying cautionary tale about the lethal potential of a perfectly crafted illusion, particularly in the digital age where any individual with sufficient resources can manufacture a compelling identity as a prince, a tycoon, or a soulmate. Criminal syndicates have evolved, learning to exploit these deep-seated dreams of a miraculous escape from the ordinary, refining their techniques into a ruthless, efficient, and repeatable conveyor belt of exploitation and death. Perhaps genuine princes of character and integrity do still walk the earth, but the brutal fate of Olga Merkusheva, and the unknown multitudes of other victims who remain nameless and unmourned in the official records, serves as a stark and necessary warning for our times. A fairy tale that seems too perfect, too fortuitous, and too perfectly aligned with one's deepest desires is, more often than not, a meticulously planned and baited trap. And the price for surrendering to its allure can be the most absolute price of all. And so, the story of Olga Merkusheva fades from the headlines, but its terrifying warning remains. It's a stark reminder that the most dangerous predators aren't always the ones lurking in a dark alley, They're the ones who know exactly how to weaponize our deepest hopes and desires. This is the core of what we explore here on The Killer Next Door, the unsettling truth that evil doesn't always look the part. If this breakdown pulled you in and made you see this case in a new light, then you've found your true crime home. So, do me 3 favors. 1. First, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. You won't want to miss our next deep dive, where we'll be shouting out some of the names and locations you've left in the comments today. 2. Second, let this story sink in, and then tell me your thoughts below. Did you know about this case before? What part of this scheme chilled you to the bone? 3. And finally, share this video with a friend. The more people who understand these tactics, the harder it becomes for the killers next door to operate in the shadows. Thank you for watching, for caring, and for being a part of this community. Stay aware, stay safe, and never stop looking behind the mask. I'll see you in the next one.